My first introduction to DC was probably this comic that I think I got from like a Happy Meal or something when I was a kid. It was a Batman and Robin comic, and it covered Dick Grayson's parents' tragic demise. I remember thinking, I should never, ever try the trapeze because this is 100% what's going to happen to me.
My first introduction to DC was the Super Friends cartoon in the 80s and all the Superpowers action figures that were available at that time.
I discovered the old Vertigo Hellblazer volumes when I was like 10 or 12 in my local library, just like fully unnumbered, and it just blew my mind. Like I had familiarity with like Sunday comics, like in the paper. There's a certain wildness that comes out of 80s British Vertigo comics being your first. But that absolutely kind of shaped my path in comics, I think, a lot.
My first introduction to DC was mainly in the forms of television and film and video games. And I think the first DC program that really caught my attention was the animated Teen Titans series. Was the first thing that really started getting me into just superheroes and all of that. Batman, the animated series, was another one. And then I think I really turned the corner when the Arkham video games came out. That was really what I was like, oh, this is the moment.
I love the Super Friends and particularly love the Flash. So my dad bought me a Flash comic book at a yard sale. And it was one where at some point he has to be both the Flash and Barry Allen at the same time. And so just runs back and forth very fast, tossing off his robe and then putting it back on to cover up his costume and then tossing back off again and and the art in that was incredible. Just this visualization of something that would not have worked in any other medium. And I think that's really where my love of comics kind of sparked.
So my first interaction with DC Comics characters, and this is going to tell you a little bit about my age, a little bit about how old I am, was the Super Friends cartoon from Hanna-Barbera. I was probably 3 or 4. It was the first time I had been exposed to Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and my little pre-kindergarten brain was boggled by the whole thing. My introduction to DC characters was the Super Friends, and quite frankly, that take is in many ways baked into my DNA and the way I think most purely about those characters.
My first introduction to DC Comics, I have a photograph of me at about 4 years old in 1989 wearing a Batman t-shirt from the new movie.
I'm Batman.
Laying on the couch just because I was already really in on the dark world of Gotham, right? It always gathered me. And then as I grew up, I loved the Batman the Animated Series. I loved Batman Returns. It's where I first met my queen, Catwoman. And then as I grew up and I started reading superhero comics more, it took me a long time in my life to really get into superhero comics. I just devoured a lot of DC stuff.